So the Ekurhuleni Council will sit tomorrow to elect a new mayor. The incumbent will replace Sivuyile Ngodwana, who was booted out 2 weeks ago after Action SA filed a motion of no confidence against him, and there was also a motion of no confidence that was filed against Nthabiseng Tshivhenga, filed by the Democratic Alliance. However, the Speaker survived the vote. The ANC and the EFF's relationship is also set to be strained. So what can we expect in tomorrow's council? Let's now speak to analyst from UNISA, that is Professor Dirk Kotze. Prof, good morning. Thank you so much for making time for us. Before we look into what to expect tomorrow, for me it is the sheer instability in the city of Ekurhuleni. And mind you, during the previous tenure, when Masina was still the mayor, it was also still under a coalition, but it was much more stable than what we are seeing currently.
Yes, that is indeed so. I think what is possibly the first and more obvious explanation is that the ANC and the EFF together has more than a 50% majority. So strictly speaking, they are the natural components of any form of coalition. At the same time, the DA and their partners, the multi-party charter, don't have don't even come close to a 50% plus one majority. So that is not an alternative. We saw during the time of Tanya Campbell, when she was the DA's mayor, how unstable it was then, because it was essentially a minority government, and she depended to a large extent on the support of the EFF. I think what we see now is that the fact that the EFF holds the veto power in this situation, the fact that they refuse that the ANC's candidate as mayor can stand and can be elected, and therefore this alternative of going for small parties, in the past it was now the African Independent Congress, that again creates the instability. And it is the fact that neither of the two parties, the ANC nor the EFF, are willing to serve under each other at this point in time, or to come to some form of resolution so that there can be stability.
Yeah, and also what this means for the relationship between the EFF as well as the ANC. The ANC, for instance, calling the EFF unruly in Ekurhuleni, and also that they are trying to correct they speak about necessitating the reconfiguration of political leadership to try and salvage the city from further regression. And I guess this is on the back of that slight regression that the city of Ekurhuleni experienced as per the AG's report. However, though, I wonder whether for the first time we could see another protected process around the appointment and the election of the mayor that may just trigger an entire re-election, because the EFF and the ANC are totally not on the same terms here. Even if you look at, for instance, how the vote played out when the former mayor was voted out, because the ANC decided to abstain.
Yes, that is indeed so. And I think that is why for tomorrow's vote, I'm very hesitant to be confident that there will be ultimately a result. Both the ANC as well as the DA, to a large, well, most of the ANC's members and the majority of the DA's members in the motion of no confidence that removed the mayor 2 weeks ago abstained from voting, because the DA's position is that they don't want to continue with the current configuration in the council and called for a re-election that would coincide with the national and provincial election. Now, we know now that so far that hasn't been accepted. So both the two of the three big parties, therefore, actually don't want to cooperate in any form of election for a new leadership in the council. And I think this is where we are actually in a stalemate situation. And some form of intervention externally, well, first of all from the provincial side, but even from the national side, I think is now necessary in order to deal with this stalemate, because the one option which hasn't been exercised, and which is indeed an option, is for the ANC and the DA to come together. But there's no indication of that being discussed at all at the moment.
Yeah. So are you speaking here about a provincial intervention coming from the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs?
Constitutionally speaking, yes, this is what they will have to do. Well, first of all, the provincial government, as you indicate the portfolio there, what they've done, for example, in Tshwane and other places, it's not a good option. It doesn't work very well on the ground, but it creates an alternative for our form of government for the interim. So it's definitely not a solution. I can speak from personal experience in Tshwane that it's certainly not working very well, but it sort of dissolves the political stalemate that sometimes exists. But I think in the end, it actually will have to be some form of cooperation between the national and provincial governments, because Ekurhuleni has become the most unstable metro in the country, I would say, definitely in Gauteng. And it cannot continue like this because there is simply no stability, whether the DA was the leading party or the ANC EFF as it is now.
Yeah. And you know, at the end of when the election results come out, you'd hear political parties speaking about that. But this is what the voters wanted. It is the voters that have voted this way. And now we need to find a way of cooperating and working together. However, though, the internal party politics also makes the final decision around what will happen at the end of the day. So how do you deal with the internal political wranglings within the political parties themselves? They try to foster some sort of stability, especially for Ekurhuleni, considering the impact that the instability has had on service delivery.
Yes, I think this is the dilemma. What you are referring to is indeed correct, and that is that the results of an election dictates what are possible. But within those results, there are options. So it depends on whether the parties are willing to cooperate with each other and not fight for their own interest. And that is at the moment, to a large extent, what is happening. The role of Action SA, I would say, is an interesting one, because they are not necessarily working in tandem with the DA and with their other coalition partners or multi-party charter partners. Because the Action SA tries to find some form of resolution within the current configuration. But as I said earlier, the DA already gave up. So it is a new election, and that has happened in some local authorities. For example, in the case of the bigger Sasolburg, there was a case in KwaZulu-Natal where a re-election ultimately did resolve it to some extent so that a new type of coalition government could be formed.
Yeah.
But in this case, it is something which has to be pushed now from outside.
Yeah, Prof, as we conclude the conversation on this particular story, is what I don't understand is, so the EFF and the ANC's working relationship, it's clearly not working in Ekurhuleni. But why is it working in the city of Joburg? Because Kabelo Gwamanda was a result, his election was a result of an arrangement between the ANC and the EFF.
Yes, I think Johannesburg has become more of a success, although I would say many of the residents in Johannesburg will say they still say the service delivery there is still questionable. It's not where it should be. But there is more stability. And I think what has happened there is after the changes with respect to the position of the speaker, it stabilized. And I think we very often disregard the very important role that the speaker is playing in any local authority in order to keep the council together and keep it functioning. And I think since the demise of the co-speaker, Colleen Makubela, there's more stability in the council, and that leads to the sort of cooperation that does exist there.
Yeah. Continuing to focus on elections, but now focusing on the upcoming elections, the May 29 polls. The MK party has now filed papers with the Electoral Court to appeal the decision by the IEC to exclude former President Jacob Zuma from the candidate list. What do you make of this? Do you think that they have a case at all?
Well, the way in which I read the Constitution and together with that the Electoral Act, for me it is absolutely clear that the person who has had a conviction of more than 12 months, and President Zuma it's 15 months, and who has not been past that clearing or cooling off process, if I can call that, of 5 years, since that person has served that sentence or completed that sentence, in his case the parole period, they are automatically disqualified as members of parliament. So I think President Zuma knows it, the MK party knows it, but they try their luck, to put it in very simple terms.
Yeah.
See to what extent political pressure can have an impact on legal processes. But my expectation is that it won't have any impact on them.
Yeah, and also considering the insistence of relying on a presidential pardon that was given to the former president, when in actual fact it isn't a presidential pardon. It was a remission decision by the president. But let's quickly move over to this one. Our National Assembly Speaker, Nthabiseng Tshivhenga, we still wait to see whether she will be handing herself over to the police today. However, though, for me, what's interesting is what's playing out in Parliament, the ANC caucus specifically. Over the weekend, the Sunday Times reporting that the political committee of the ANC wasn't happy with Lichisa Tenodi's decision to go ahead with the proposal from the Democratic Alliance for that motion of no confidence in the Speaker. What do you make of that, Prof? Where does it tell you where the ANC stands with regards to this issue? Also considering once she's formally charged, the step-aside rule of the ANC kicks in.
Yes, I think this is a major challenge for the ANC. It's a headache for them of how to deal with this, because she is a senior person within the party. Her husband is a senior person in the alliance in general, especially in the Communist Party. And she is a very senior person, one of the top 3 or 4 on the protocol list, as Speaker of Parliament. So this is therefore one of the, I would say, after the court cases of President Zuma, possibly the most, or a situation that involves one of the most senior ANC persons. I think what the ANC wants to avoid is a motion of no confidence at all costs, because that can potentially divide the ANC about how they will vote. It depends whether there's going to be a secret vote or not. And what the ANC wants to portray to broader society now is that they are serious about acting against corruption, that the so-called renewal approach, that is being implemented. And what happens now fits within that. But at the same time, I guess there's many ANC persons who feel uncomfortable about the fact that the ANC does not protect her, in public at least. And that can alienate a lot of ANC support, especially those who are in similar positions. So I think that the ANC, from an election point of view, will say, well, this works in our favor, but from an internal political point of view, it creates contradictions within the ANC. And I'm not sure how they are going to deal with that. But what is at the moment the case is that the Speaker is essentially on her own. And in my view, also at the end of her political career in the ANC.
Do you think that her hand is being forced here? Because in her papers as well, she speaks about the humiliation that would come with the arrest. However, though, there's also the part around what happens to a position as the Speaker of the National Assembly. Do you think that her hand is being forced?
Yes, it is so. And she must just think about other presidents in countries like South Korea and Brazil, and the Prime Minister in Italy who went to jail. So if you are accused and found guilty, there's no excuses in terms of protocol.
Yeah. Prof, thank you so much for your time. Political analyst there, Professor Dirk Kotze. Really appreciate the moments that you've shared with us, speaking here about a number of issues, including the council sitting in Ekurhuleni tomorrow. Will there be a mayor elected, and other topical issues? Former President Jacob Zuma, as well as Sivuyile Ngodwana.